My game of the day from round 4 of the Qatar Masters Open is Jan Krzysztof Duda from Poland against Magnus Carlsen, world champion. Well, it's always good to look at Carlsen's games, but I was particularly interested in this one because today, with the black pieces, he played the Najdorf variation. So no Berlins, no Spanishes. Now, he did play this earlier in the tournament, and this was in his repertoire a few years ago, I think particularly when he was being coached a little bit by Kasparov. But yeah, in recent years he's just played the Spanish mainly with black. But today I think he had something very special in mind, because his opponent, Duda, is a young player from Poland and very promising. But Duda has a particular line that he specialises in against the Najdorf. Now, he's played bishop e2, and this is pretty normal. Black plays e5 and pushes the knight back to this poor square on b3. And now the standard move here is just castle. But Duda plays bishop g5, and this has been a little bit trendy over the past few years. Now, in the 1950s and 60s, White used to play like this and play in a very positional way, just taking on f6 and playing knight d5 and castling kingside, but White never really got anywhere. But the modern way of playing this is to take on f6 and play queen d3 and castles queenside and then knight d5. And this is a much more interesting position, quite double-edged when kings are castled on opposite sides of the board. And Duda has played this line many, many times. So Magnus could expect this, and he played very quickly knight c6. And he has a specific idea in mind. After queen d3, where he didn't just castle and allow this idea with castles queenside, he played knight b4. So the queen got pushed back, and then he forced White into this exchange. And the point is this: well, obviously White can't castle straight away. That will run into bishop g5 with a nasty pin. And anyway, if you push this knight back, well, again, castle's not possible here, but if White prepares this with queen d3, this is a bit different, because with the inclusion of a3, then, well, there are many ways for black to play this, but you could simply exchange on b3 and put the knight on d4, and I think if anyone is better in this position, it's black with this superb knight on d4. So Duda was a bit confused and started consuming a fair bit of time here. He played knight d5, but after this, then black has a really comfortable game. So Carlsen's opening preparation worked very well. Well, pawn takes knight. This is already better for black, because White's queenside pawn majority is going nowhere, but black can roll his kingside pawns down the board very easily. So queen takes, queen c7 from Carlsen. Now White could play more modestly like this and, let's say, castle on the kingside, but black is already better in this position, has no difficulties with the d pawn. That can always be protected. Sometimes you can actually break with d5. You have two bishops. You can also play on the queen side with b5. Slightly better for black already. Duda continued in his typical way, castling queenside, but here again black has no difficulties. Carlsen protected the d pawn and brought out the bishop. It's one of the reasons he played queen c7, was to protect the b pawn. And the queen came back and black castled. To my mind, black already has the advantage. He has two bishops, his king is completely safe, and he has a ready-made attack on the queen side. He can use semi-open c-file, but he also has this option to play a5. For example, let's suppose White pushes on the king side. a5, this is far quicker. This is very dangerous. Advancing this a-pawn all the way down the board to weaken the dark squares. And if a4, this is a very common idea in the Najdorf, you just give the b-pawn away. If queen takes, then rook b8, and all these files are open. And if pawn takes, well, the a-pawn marches on, and you start to open up white's king position. For a pawn, that is an absolute bargain. And look, white is miles behind with his attack. His attack goes nowhere. Great position for black. So Duda realised that basically his opening had gone badly wrong. He'd been caught out by some very nice preparation from Magnus. So he started to try to complicate the game with f4. Well, Magnus, after a little think, decides to take this. In fact, there's no reason why you can't simply play a5, because f5 doesn't get very far. The bishop just drops back, and this pawn is going nowhere. That's a reasonable way to play, but Magnus, well, a principled man, he decides to take on f4, and white's idea is to throw the knight into the game. Now, if white manages to take here, then it loosens black's king position a little bit. Let me show you. And white can attack on these light squares very, very easily. You know, something like this. There's queen b3. There's also rook f1. I mean, it's a very easy position for white to play, and you can see that suddenly black has no prospect of an attack. So Carlsen dropped back this bishop. Good move. Now, he gives back this f-pawn, but, I mean, this was the reason that he exchanged on f4. This bishop suddenly turns into an absolute monster in the middle of the board, and black still has the initiative. So now he's using the c-file, threatening to take. So c3 is necessary, and b5. This is all very logical. What black wants to do is at some moment break this open to open up the bishop's diagonal, and of course the c-file as well. Typical Najdorf position. You have a beautiful attack against the king, white's king on b1, but black's king completely safe on the other side of the board. Knight f3 played. Well, it's a good idea to try and knock this one out. So bishop e6, so chunky, that bishop on e6, protected by the pawn on f7, looking down here, covering some nice squares here, positionally wonderful. Now, I mean, white has a difficult position here, but it might be the most prudent to exchange off that dangerous bishop and maybe just step to the side. Queen d6 will be met by queen a5, and I mean, black is doing pretty well here, but maybe just queen e3. Well, I prefer black's position here. You know, you still have chances to attack. This pawn on e4 is slightly weak. Positionally, very nice for black. But I think that's the safest way for white to play. Instead, Duda played knight d4, looking at that bishop again. But bishop c4, good move. And after this, well, I'd expected something like queen b7. Looking at the e-pawn and preparing to push with b4. But Magnus is an impatient man. He didn't want to mess around. He just played b4 straight away. So it's like he was playing a blitz game. You know, chuck this move out, just throw a pawn in. I mean, strategically, very nice. Opening up the c-file, opening up this diagonal. But, you know, a pawn is a pawn. So this was taken, and queen b6. By this stage, Duda was getting into time pressure, and trying to defend such a position when you're short of time is, well, nigh on impossible. So black is a pawn down, but what an initiative he has. And yeah, talk about impatient. Magnus threw this rook out and simply allowed white to take on f7. I mean, this is unbelievable. Well, for the moment, Duda didn't take this, and you know, Magnus could still drop the queen back to c7 to cover f7. But no, he allowed this pawn to be taken again. He just cranked up the pressure here and looked at the e-pawn. Well, okay, Duda took this pawn and then scuttled back with the queen. I mean, in fact, white can't lay a glove on black's king in this position. There's actually no danger at all. But still, I mean, Carlsen, it's clear he's so impatient. He just playing route one here, just attacking. And here, yeah, of course, you could take on e4, but Magnus wants to keep cracking open white's king position. So if this is taken, then black starts to hammer down the b file. So this is why these sacrifices have been made. It's all about getting that bishop into the game. And black has pretty good compensation. So Duda played a3. And this was exchanged off. Now if a takes b4, then the queen switches to the a file, and this looks fatal. So knight takes b4. And queen takes e4 check. And the king is in a spot of trouble. Knight d3 was perhaps the best chance, but there's actually a really nice variation here. Beautiful variation. Black wants to keep attacking on the b file, but before shifting the rook to b8, play bishop c3 first. Now if that's taken, I mean, black's attack looks irresistible. So the rook goes back, has to keep protecting the knight here, and only then switch to the b file. And here that's a serious threat because there's no longer a rook on d2 defending b2. It's all very subtle, but anyway, looks very good for black. But after this check, instead, Duda played king a2, and now Magnus seized his chance. He took on b4, so an exchange sack, and rook check. Now the king is coming up the board, and rook b8. So this pawn is going. So little by little, Magnus is just chipping away at white's king position. He's the exchange down, but I tell you what, that bishop it's almost worth both white's rooks in this position. I mean, it's just a fantastic piece, attacking and defending at the same time. And in practice, this position is utterly lost for white. I mean, let me give an example. I mean, white has no really active moves here. But if, let's say, g3, sometimes it can be useful to not to have this pawn on prise. But this shows you exactly what black is threatening. Check, another check, and then the rook just goes to a8, and that's that. I mean, if you run this through a computer, you'll find a series of only moves for white for about 10 moves in a row that just about keep him in the game. But really, in practice, this is completely lost. Duda played rook c1. This is on move 38. He still had to get to move 40, and I mean, this is impossible to defend. Now it really is completely lost. And Magnus finished off with this, a check, and well, if the king goes here, then it's clear there's mate on a4. So the rook had to interpose, but now that's gone, completely gone. I mean, it's quite neat to take with the bishop rather than the rook, because white can't prevent black having basically a free hit next turn. So this is how the game ended. The rook blocked, and bishop d4 check was the final move of the game. If king c1, then check. The rook has to go in the way, and well, black is a piece up and about to mate the king. So, well, what a fantastic game. I love the energy that Carlsen had, not messing about defending pawns, just playing with a very free hand, giving pawns away, opening up lines, and basically pushed Duda's flag over here and beat him on position 2. Fantastic stuff. So after 4 rounds, there are actually 5 players on 3.5. Li Chao, Giri, Carlsen, Matlarkov, and Wesley So all of those on 3.5 out of 4. I should say that Li Chao and Giri drew their game, so there's no one left on 100%. Thanks for watching.